It's I'm losing my voice, first of all. it, it, it's good to be here. Thanks for coming. I do see a lot of friends and relatives. My sister Maria, my wife, they're here to make sure I tell you the truth. I'm sure. Anyway, here I am and wish to share with you some of my family's and our company's experiences, and also talk to you a bit about the unique product that we sell. As mentioned, Jelinek Cork is an old company. It's the oldest continuing operational cork companies in the world, and perhaps the oldest continuing operational company right here in Oakville. We have been located in Bronte area since 1949. I'm not that old, by the way. And we're still here today. But let me not get ahead of myself here. Let me give you a better historical perspective on our business and our family. Jelinek Cork was founded over 170 years ago in what is today the Czech Republic, or as they try to rename it, Czechia, which I object to, by the way. So it is not too confusing for you. The former Czechoslovakia was made up of three provinces: Bohemia, Moravia, and Slovakia. On January 1st, 1993, Czechoslovakia split into two countries. The Czech Republic today is made up of the two remaining provinces, Moravia and Bohemia. Moravia is where Jelinek Cork was founded. Bohemia is where Prague is the capital city and exists. Slovakia now is a country on its own. I'm sure many of you have visited Spain and Portugal. Have you? Who has visited Spain and Portugal? Yeah. You see, so you've seen cork trees growing there, probably. If not, you've driven by them. Cork trees grow primarily around the Mediterranean Sea. So the question is, how did Jelinek Cork get started in Bohemia, in Czechoslovakia? Let me explain. And this may be a bit confusing because there's a lot of Henrys involved in this. There are 5 generations of Henrys that are or have been in the business. There's already a Henry, 6th generation born. So there might be 6. So 5 generations of Henrys. Let's start with Henry the First. Let's go back to around 1853. Now, many of you may know, some of you may not. Excuse me.
Sorry to disturb.
Please come in. Many of you may know, but some of you may not know this, that Czechoslovakia has some of the best beer in the world. And also the highest per capita beer drinkers in the world. And this already existed around 1853. And young Henry, his father in the evenings would always send him to fetch some beer from the local pub, because in those days the beer wasn't in beer bottles, it was in big barrels. So he would go to the pub and they would pour the beer into these big mugs, and this young Henry boy would have to carry them, half a mile to the farmhouse where they lived, and half of it would be spilled. Once in a while he'd trip and he would get home, and then his father would become very upset that all the beer was missing, and he would yell at him and so on. And this went on and on. When young Henry, one of these days when he was walking home, he decided, you know, it might be wiser to put beer into bottles which were just coming into existence. The question is, how do you seal those bottles? You seal them with a cork. And that's how the cork business started. He went to the breweries, and the, the big barrels that beer was in already, they were already using cork. They were using these big bungs to plug up the barrels. So young Henry told them, listen, I've got this idea. So they hired him as their representative. And he was about 20 years old at the time. And he decided that it was very critical for him to learn the business. So he made his way to Spain, where where all of the cork nearly came from in those days. And he got there by donkeys and working his way through and so on, and he finally met up with a cork company, and they hired him, and he learned how to punch corks out of bark and what have you. And he brought bags and bags of this back to the Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia, and bottled these bottles, and hence he formed Jelinek Cork in 1855. This carried on for a number of years, but as the business grew, his growth and hope for enjoying life also grew, and he spent all the money that he made, and he demanded that his son, Henry II, do all the work both on the farm and in the business. They had big arguments, of course. The business nearly went bankrupt, and Henry II eventually was given the business, and he carried it on. But he had the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as they say. He had the same outlook as his father. He too demanded of Henry III, who was my father, the same thing: work hard on the farm, work hard in the business, and I'll spend the money. So my father was born, Henry III, my father was born in 1900. And he worked very, very hard and had this disciplinarian father ruling over him. And the World War I was starting, so he decided the best way to get out of this terrible mess he was in was to sign up and enlist as in the military, because military folks were very highly respected, and he saw them with their fancy uniforms and so on. So he did. He enlisted, but he was only 16 years old in 1916, and he wasn't allowed to enlist. So he forged his birth certificates and so on, and it said he was 18. So he did actually fight in World War I in the cavalry, on the wrong side, by the way, which was the Austro Hungarian Empire. And so he on cavalry was fighting in the war against cannons. It was a crazy war, like all wars are even today. He came back with some prestige, however, and he continued the business. And his first move, once he got into really getting involved in the business, was to move the company from this little village, where the farming village, he moved it to Prague. And it was probably the best move, and that saved Jelinek Cork, because that's where the action was. He met up with a lot of other businessmen and entrepreneurs and politicians, and business was going really, really well. Then 1929 came around, the Great Depression. And you would think that Jelinek Cork would suffer as badly as most other businesses did, but it didn't suffer. People drank more beer and drank more wine. It's the truth. And the business grew more and more. Excuse me, I'll have a drink. Talking of drinking. So business was good, but the next terrible thing that happened was that in 1939, I believe, the Nazis came into Czechoslovakia and occupied the country. And with it, they brought terror and fright to everybody. And my father was a collaborator against them. And on October 24th, 1944, which is my birthday, on that day, he was imprisoned by the Nazis and thrown into jail. He was there for a number of months being tortured. My wife and I and parts of my other family visited this jail where he was held, and they still have the torture chambers there. You wouldn't believe it, that such a thing could exist. Anyway, he survived, and how he survived was he tried to learn English. And the way he did it, he had a little pencil, and he would write, his language was German and Czech, and he would write the words in German and in Czech, and beside it try to learn the English. But what would he write it on? The only available paper was toilet paper. And I bring you can look at it after. Here is some of his notes. Anyway, he felt that Prague would be bombed in the war by the Allies, as were many of the other cities and towns and factories. And so he bought a piece of land outside of Prague, about half an hour outside of Prague, where he built a factory to manufacture crown corks. I don't know if you know what those are. Those are the ones that you today find on beer bottles or Coke bottles, or the crown on the top. And in those days, some of you may remember, some won't. Today there's plastic inside. In the early days it was cork, little discs inside of those. The Allies didn't bomb Czechoslovakia very much, and Prague very little. But they bombed all the countries around and all the factories, and among them, they bombed a lot of other crown cork factories, leaving my dad's factory the only crown cork factory in Europe. What can you say? It was good for business. The next thing that happened in this unbelievable cycle of events is that we got liberated. Czechoslovakia got liberated. By who? By the Russian communists, right? And they went on and they took over, they nationalized factories, businesses, houses. They took over everything, and they came to my dad. They took over the factory, and they were taking over our house, and they came to my dad and said, "Mr. Jelinek, we have great news for you. We're going to make you our top salesman." And he said, "You're going to make me the top salesman in my company?" I said, "It's not your company, Mr. Jelinek. It belongs to the state. You are, as of now, the salesman." And they would send him out of the country to sell cork to other countries. And they held the rest of the family, mother and 5 children, as hostages back home. If he didn't return, we would be thrown in jail or worse. He and mother decided at that point that it was impossible to live in Czechoslovakia anymore, and it was time to leave the country and to escape. This was not an easy task. It took a lot of logistics to get a family of 7 out of the country. At the time, my oldest brother, Frank, was already going to boarding school in Switzerland, in Lausanne. My dad was being sent on a selling trip out of the country, so the 2 of them would be out. But before he left, of course, he organized everything. He got together with a South American diplomat, and they came up with a scheme that this diplomat would act as our father and would drive us over the border. And the diplomat had a forged passport, a diplomatic passport, in which it said 5 people can leave the country. So on the particular day when we were going to leave, we all got up very early in the morning, got in his car. It was very scary, obviously. And we drove about 3 hours or so to the border. Slightly before the border, the car had to stop, and it was flagged down by a Russian guard. And the guard said, "Give me a lift to the border." And you had to do it because he's now the boss. He's got his guns and whatever. And okay, he gets in with us, and we're having to pretend that we're the children of this South American guy. And so we had to pretend that we don't speak Czech, and that we speak Spanish, and the only words we knew were "sí." So anyway, we get to the border, the guard goes out, and the diplomat is told to go into this border hut where the main border guard was. And he showed them the passport, and it says for 5 people. But actually there's 6 of us, right? And he says to this guy, "Hey, Boris, go to the car. Tell me how many there are." Boris goes over to the car and he counts. There's 5. There's 5 of them, he yells back. And the guard says, "Okay, that's 5. It says in the passport 5. They forgot to count. So the miscount by the Russians saved our lives. We eventually got through, met up with father and oldest brother in Lausanne. The ages, thank you, the ages of the kids, I was 5 years old at the time, and it went up in the car about 12 years old. We met in Lausanne. There was a great celebration and so on. Prior to, this is the important part right now, prior to our escape, father and mother felt that something bad was going to happen in Czechoslovakia. So they wisely sent some money ahead of time to Great Britain, to the UK, and to UK banks. Not much money, but enough to get started. From Switzerland, and I'll get back to that shortly. From Switzerland, we made our way to the UK, where we were destined to board a ship to Halifax. About 10 days or so before sailing, Father and Mother went to the Bank of England and said, okay, we would like you now to transfer our funds from the UK to Canada, to a Canadian bank. So once we get there, we can start our life a little easier. Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Jelinek, we're so sorry. It's not allowed to do that after the war. No monies can leave this country. Great panic happened. You can imagine the fear and unknown of what's going on. So after much thinking and debates, they came up with what they felt was a great solution. They went out and bought antique furniture. They had a crate built about this big. It was before container times. Remember, there were no shipping containers. So they had a wooden crate built, and this antique furniture was placed into that and shipped to Canada. In the meantime, we arrived in Halifax, took a train to Montreal, and we lived in Montreal for about 6 months or 8 months while Father went looking for a good place to settle our family. To make a long story short, he found Bronte. Several reasons. One, houses were cheap. Two, close to the US border in case we ever wanted to do business in the US. Three, there were 4 boys in the family, and he didn't want them going in the military. Fear of war still existed. So we settled in Canada, Bronte, with the understanding that we could do great business in the US if needed. We all came to Bronte. They bought a house. The bank loaned some money on the as collateral against these antiques, which was amazing. The antiques were sold. Part of the house was paid for, but of course that was it. There was no money left. So how do you start a business? No money. You don't speak the language. You have 5 children who like to eat a lot, who get sick a lot, and so on. I have to tell you, there's some very, very good people in this world. One of them, or a bunch of them, are a few of our cork suppliers in Portugal. They knew our history. We've dealt with them for years. We still deal with them today, by the way, many of them. And they came to us and said, Jelineks, you know, we understand your predicaments. You can buy from us and you pay us when you can. So totally open credit for as long as we need it to have it. But not only that, Allen's Drugstore. Does anyone remember Allen's Drugstore in Bronte? Yeah. Allen's Drugstore. Mr. Allen came to my mother and father and said, we understand you will all need medicine from time to time. Feel free to come here. We'll give it to you. When you can, pay. When you can't, hold off and we'll wait. Not only that, Lakeside Marketeria, Hills Marketeria, and there was another one called Feduk and Wright. 2 grocery stores in Bronte in those days. Same thing. They came and said, Jelinek family, take whatever food you need, pay when you can. So, of course, it took us a while to pay, but it got started. Bags of corks would arrive from Portugal on credit. These were cork stoppers. It was only cork stoppers in those days. And father was out selling them to the distilleries. I can mention Hiram Walker and Seagram's and Shenley's. But those corks had to be sorted. But we couldn't afford hiring people to sort them into various qualities and so on. So what happened? We kids would run home after school every day, pour the corks onto the living room floor and sit there for 3 hours or so, sorting them back and forth the right way. And so that's how business got going. And that was in Bronte many years ago. Henry IV comes up. That's me. I told you there'd be confusion with all these Henrys, and there are. The cork stopper, I liked the cork stopper business very much, but I couldn't find myself selling cork stoppers for the rest of my life. It had to be more exciting than that, right? So I expanded the product line to many new and interesting items, ranging from gaskets to fishing rod grips to handbags like my wife has right now, even umbrellas. So that made it much more exciting. We expanded that product line. More on this later. Then something very dramatic in the world happened in 1989. What happened? The Iron Curtain fell down. Free. Everyone was free suddenly. Czechoslovakia became free. Hungary, Poland, you name it. Berlin Wall collapsed. It was a wonderful celebratory time for everyone, for our family. Even now, I get emotional. Excuse me. That's a show, by the way. So I decided that it would be wonderful to bring the Cork Company back to the Czech Republic where it was founded. And I did that. The Iron Curtain was down, exciting time for company and family. We were headed back to where our roots began. One of the highlights in my life was to help young entrepreneurs in Czechoslovakia learn how to run businesses and the ethics of the Western world. I hired a number of people, I think at that time about 10 or 12 Czechs. None of them were older than 28 years old. There's a reason for that. Even the government in those days in Czechoslovakia, the cabinet ministers were all in their 20s. Young guys, because you couldn't trust anybody over 30. They still had the old communist mentality in them. You just take what you can and never work. That's the mentality. And by the way, some of those folks I hired then are still with us today. And I'm very proud that they are as ethical in business as one should be. Let me see here. An interesting thing, and this should interest the Historical Society here. I've always been interested in trying to fix up old historical buildings. I actually live in one just not far from here. And we bought in Czech Republic, we bought a building. It's about half an hour or 45 minutes outside of Prague. We bought a building. It was an old monastery that was built in the late 1800s, we think. And we restored that to a beautiful building with some apartments on the top and offices and a little bit of a warehouse. And we worked out of there for many years. I'll just read you directly my feeling. It is difficult and costly meeting modern day building codes without disturbing the historical structural characteristics of a dwelling. I agree with that so much. It may not make total business sense to spend so much money on some of these buildings, but it certainly makes a lot of sense to maintain it for historical purposes and for social well-being. Which brings me, someone asked me about the Cork house we had here in Oakville. Shortly after that time, we bought another old building up by Niagawa and Dundas. It was called the Amos Bigger House. And the Amos Bigger House was built in 1816 by a United Empire loyalist. And it was located where there was going to be a mall, but the town made them move it. And we bought it. It was just a shell, basically. And we restored that. I know many of you have been there and seen it. It's a beautiful building now. We ran our showroom and retail shop out of there till COVID. Once COVID hit, we decided the expense was too great because there were no people around. So we sold it to a dentist, and I'm hoping he maintains it as he promised he would. I'd like to give you a little side note, an interesting story which has profound and long-lasting effects on me. It happened in 1987 or 1988. A shipping container arrived at our back door, our warehouse door in Bronte, and it was accompanied by a Canadian border guard and an RCMP. And they came to my office and said, "Mr. Jelinek, we're here, we want to be present while this container is unloaded." I thought, oh my God, what have we done? And as it turns out, I said, "What's going on?" And as it turns out, there was a family of refugees inside the container that they weren't there when they came to our place. They caught them at the container depot in Mississauga or Toronto, wherever they checked them, and they just wanted to see if they left things behind. Well, they did leave things behind. It was a family, a mother and father and a young child. They spent over 3 weeks inside this hot, cold, no space container. The container was packed with cork, so they made a little area maybe this big, and that's where they lived. They had brought with them bottles of water, obviously, cans of sardines and other things to eat. They would drink the water and then use those containers for human waste, which was there when we undid it, and so on. And I thought to myself, my God, you know, this family escaped from Romania. What was that guy's name? Nicholas Comescu. Yes, whoever said that, yes. He was a terrible, terrible dictator, and he deserved what he and his wife got, which was they were executed in 1989. In that container, I ripped this off one of the curtains. You can look at it after closer. It's a drawing. There's a Statue of Liberty, a young boy walking a dog, a palm tree. It's their dream of freedom, right? Oops, yes, but those were, and out of some boxes that they had, they made some card games that I also found, and they played cards inside. It's an amazing story. They survived, and I hope they're happy today, living here in this great country. Okay. Oh yeah. How do you pronounce that guy's name? Nikolai Kosescu. Okay, but anyway, their journey reminded me of our family journey in pursuit of freedom. The company continued to expand, and today we have locations in 6 countries. We're located, of course, here in Canada, in the US, in Portugal, in Czech Republic, in Slovakia, and in the United Kingdom. I've told you about the Amos Bigger house, so I'll skip that. Our 3 kids entered the business during the 1990s. It has a nice sound to it.
My sister.
Okay. Our 3 kids entered the business during the 1990s, and by 2006, were in full control as I myself stepped away from day-to-day operations. But I have to tell you a couple of interesting stories with those kids. In the 1990s, they would work in our office, learning the business and so on. And one day they came to me and they said, "Dad, you know, you should have a website." I said, what's a website, right? I said, okay. So they sort of explained. I said, okay, well, do the website. And they worked on it for several months, taking pictures of this and this, and they said during the course of the time, you know, it's also going to be a place where people can click buttons and buy something. So yeah, sure. So they did this, and then after a couple of months, they come to me. They say, "Dad, we're ready to go live." I said, "Well, what does it mean, go live?" "We are live." And they said, "No, the website's going live." "Okay, fine, go live." So I'm walking back to my office, and so I hear a bing, and then a lot of yay. And I said, "What's going on?" "We got our first order." And I said, "How much was it? What's the order for?" $5. Wow. Wow. And then another ding, ding, ding. And guess what? That first year, over $1 million worth of online orders. Amazing. And I didn't know what it was. And by the way, it's similar to AI today. I'm staying in front of it with the AI. I think it's a very important thing. I understand there's some negatives, but overall, to me, it's amazing. So the three kids are doing a great job. They really are. I was a little worried, and there's another Henry in there, by the way, of course. I was a little worried about it because, normally each Henry up till then was a dictator, and what we said had to be done. But when there's three of them, that makes it a little more difficult. So they've come up with a little program that they have, and every morning they have a 15-minute meeting between themselves. One's in Calgary, one's here in Oakville, one's in Savannah, Georgia. Every morning, 15-minute meeting, and they end the meeting that each one of them has to say something positive. And it's gotten them very close, and it's working well. It's working well. Okay, let me tell you a bit about the cork trees themselves. First of all, I mentioned something about Spain earlier, that Spain was the main country for cork trees growing. That all ended during the Spanish Civil War, 1936, 1939, I believe. Why? Because Spain ran out of fuel and they cut down all trees, including all cork trees. And they never bothered to replace those cork trees. A cork tree, from the time it's planted, it takes 25 years before you can peel the bark off of it the first time. And that bark that you peel off the first time is called virgin cork. It's not very good for many things other than decorative purposes and so on. And this is what virgin cork looks like. Rough. And the second harvest, and you call them harvests, takes place 9 years later and every 9 years after that. So it doesn't kill the tree. The tree goes on living for roughly 250 years, at which time the tree is cut down and 2 new trees are planted. Trees are government controlled. You cannot just go and arbitrarily cut trees. If one dies, you have to plant 2 new ones. The second harvest, the second stripping, already looks like this. And from that, you can punch the corks. Okay? You get it? And then you punch the corks and they come out. And then what's left over is called waste, but it's not really waste. This is very, very important because you then grind it up and make all sorts of other items out of it. Now, I'm always recently asked about how the business, or told, I'm not asked, I'm told how the cork business is dying, that everyone's switching to screw caps, that the business can't possibly be sustained. Well, let me tell you, nothing could be further from the truth. As the screw caps came on, we, meaning the cork industry as a whole, came up with new products every year. There's only a limited amount of cork available each year to produce whatever one produces. It's used 100% every year, whether it's for cork stoppers or not. Having said that about cork stoppers, let me give you some statistics that may surprise you. There are 30 billion bottles, glass bottles, produced in the world every year. Of those 30 billion, 18 billion of them have corks in them. And the good news is 3 billion are sparkling wine, so we can keep drinking. More statistics on cork. The trees are evergreens. The harvesting and stripping is every 9 years, as I told you. The forests remove 14 million tons. The cork forests remove 14 million tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. The cork forests support the world's highest levels of forest biodiversity, second only to the Amazon rainforests. There's enough cork to last 100 years or more. On average, today, even with screw caps, there are 40 billion stoppers produced every day. A normal sized tree there's enough cork on it, bark on it, to produce 5,000 to 10,000 stoppers per tree. But there are bigger trees. There's one called the whistler tree. It's the largest of the cork trees, and it's called whistler because there's birds, I guess they whistle on it. And that tree produces 100,000 stoppers by itself. It's the most environmentally friendly material there can be. It's renewable, recyclable, and reusable. And from it, of course, are the vast variety of products that are produced. As I said, people often come to me with sympathetic looks on their faces and say, I guess business is suffering since there are so many screw caps. Couldn't be further from the truth, as I said. Examples: floors, walls, fishing rod handles, shoes, cork for musical instruments. The list goes on. I could describe all, but you would be bored with all these items. I will only tell you quickly about something more modern that you may be familiar with. It's about Jeff Bezos and his Blue Origin, and Elon Musk and SpaceX. What could be in common? We work with both to some degree. Cork has exceptional thermal insulation. During World War II, cork was used to insulate nuclear warheads. You know, they travel fast and heat up. By the mid-1960s, cork was used on all Minute Maid rockets that fly at 24,000 kilometers an hour. This prompted NASA to use cork on its Apollo programs. It is now used on spaceships on their heat shields, including the Artemis program. And when in flight, it protects from the freezing cold of outer space. I can't think of anything better that can describe this amazing product than these rocket ships using it. It smolders, but it doesn't burn. It can be used, the trees don't burn. They can be used as fire shields against forest fires. The fire from, say, eucalyptus trees will get up to it, but once it reaches the cork trees, it stops. So there's great potential for future use of that. In fact, we are in slight talks, very preliminary talks, in California, where perhaps this might one day be. Let me close with this before questions and answers. Our family loves Canada. We love Oakville. Whether through business, skating, or politics, our family is proud to return as best we could to a community and a country that gave us so much. Thank you all. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and consider watching some of our other historical videos.